17. This is the Commercial Board of Adjustment, so we'll be hearing cases that start with BAC this morning. If you're here for a residential case, those start with BAR, and those will be heard after lunch today. I don't have one special announcement to make. We have a guest from our residential board joining us today, Mr. Epstein, to my right. We welcome you to the board, and we appreciate you helping us out. So we have a full complement of members this morning. This board is a citizens court appointed by the City Council. The board's meetings and its methods of handling applications and other matters are conducted in conformance with state law. The board has three broad powers: to grant variances to the development specifications required by the zoning ordinance, to approve special exception uses allowed by the zoning ordinance, and to render judgment on city officials' interpretations of the zoning ordinance when there is a dispute regarding the meaning of the ordinance. A minimum of 7 members or alternate members constitutes a quorum, which is necessary to hold a hearing or to conduct business, and we do have a quorum present today. State law provides that 7 affirmative votes are required to decide in favor of the applicant on any matter, to approve a variance or a special exception, or to reverse a decision of a city official. All decisions of the board are final and are subject to appeal only before a court of jurisdiction. Any person aggrieved by a decision of the board must petition the court within 10 days of the board's decision. To facilitate an efficient and orderly hearing, the board has established some procedures which we will follow today. First, each case will be called by the number on the left-hand side of the agenda. We have a pretty full docket today, so I'd like to ask that if you are here to speak in support, that as soon as you hear your case called, please come forward to the central microphone and be prepared to speak. Staff will summarize its findings about the case based on research on site at the property. Next, those persons supporting an application will speak and be permitted a total of 7 minutes. Then those persons opposing an application will speak and also be permitted a total of 7 minutes. It is the responsibility of the applicant and the opposition to allocate their respective time among those persons speaking. Finally, following the presentation by the opposition, the applicant will be permitted a total of 3 minutes for rebuttal, after which time the public hearing on the case will be closed, and I'll open the floor to questions from the board. If you wish to address the board, please come to the central microphone once your case is called. Present a completed peach-colored registration of interest form, state your name and mailing address, and state your opinion. If you do not desire to speak for or against a case, you may, as an alternative, record your opinion on a registration of interest form and present it to staff during the hearing on that case. The board will vote on each case after it is presented and before the public hearing on the next case. During board deliberation and voting, no further public testimony is permitted, although the board may direct questions to the applicant or to any other person in order to review or clarify testimony already presented. Copies of all applications, reports prepared by city staff, and petitions and letters expressing oppositions to or support of applications are available for review. For further information, please contact the Applications Division of the Development Department on the lower level of City Hall tomorrow morning. While in council chambers, please disengage all audio elements of electronic devices to avoid disruption of these proceedings. Those are all the announcements I have to make this morning. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the April 19th hearing. We did have those via email, and if there are no corrections, I'll take a motion and a second. Please begin voting on the minutes. And those minutes were approved with a couple of members abstaining who were not present at that meeting. Next item on our agenda are the cases that we'll hear today. The first case is a continued case from last meeting, and it is case number BAC 17-
We will do that.
Thank you very much. Our next item on our agenda is case BAC 17-029.
Mr. Chairman, I have to recuse myself on this next case.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
BAC 17029 Siegel Trust by Dak Hatfield at 2941 Livingston Avenue. The request is a special exception in A5 One Family District with TCU residential overlay to permit the construction of an auxiliary parking lot.
Good morning. Please come forward.
Good morning. My name is Steve Halliday. Excuse me? Yeah, I can do that. Hi, can you hear me? My name is Steve Halliday. I live at 1601 South Henderson Street, and I represent 97W. We're the architecture firm that represents the developer for the project. So this special exception was, we received a variance to the form-based code to allow parking across Bowie Street. There's an overall development of a 30,000 square foot building that is sort of landlocked. It's got its property line to property line. There's no parking on site. And so our client takes old buildings and breathes new life into them. This is a pretty interesting, cool old building. It's been paintball. It's been Matt Ivans. But it's currently sort of an eyesore. And so I guess what we're asking here is to allow this special exception across the street, but as close and as adjacent as possible, so that we can accommodate approximately 30,000 square feet of office and restaurant mixes, which require approximately 134 parking spaces. We're still working through tenant mix and total number of parking, and those will sort of come as with this approval, I suppose. So seems like we're trying to meet all of the requirements and no other variances are requested.
Okay.
We've worked with local or adjacent property owners and tried to accommodate them, but at the same time trying to get as many parking spaces as allowed without requesting any variances.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in support? Anyone here to speak in opposition? Mr. Halliday, you might want to stay close because we'll have questions at the end. Opposition? I'm sorry, if you're ready, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. Someone left their glasses.
Glasses? Anyone?
Good morning. My name is Michelle Hawks, and I reside at 2933 Livingston Avenue. And the variance request for the auxiliary parking lot states the variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, but it will indeed affect my health and welfare. I live right next to the north side of the proposed parking lot. This is not just a house, it is my home. My bedroom and my office are adjacent to the proposed parking spaces. I spoke with Mr. Hatfield a while back, but was not fully understanding the details of the proposed parking map until I literally went out into the yard, remembered what happened when this was used as a parking lot before, and realized the impact. I have a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis and have included a letter from my physician explaining the hardship that I would experience as stress, lack of sleep, and fatigue will be a constant battle if this project were to be approved. I do what the MS Society recommends. I go to bed and get up at the same time every morning. I go to bed I clear my mind after work, and I make sure my bedroom is cool, quiet, and dark. And changes in sleep behaviors decrease your sleep quality. If I'm awoken, I can't get back to sleep. The noise from the cars, people, car lights, the exhaust that could come from the parking lot in this hot summer, and the stress of fearing that a car could run through the fence into my bedroom are of serious concern for me. Stress contributes to more periods of wakefulness during sleep, especially with multiple sclerosis. And basically, with the way this affects me and the multiple sclerosis, I've documented it in the handout I provided. If there's an increase of stress, you have a decrease of sleep. And then your decrease of sleep, you're going to have more fatigue and physical disability. It's like if you're going to come to a hearing the next morning and you've been out drunk till 4 a.m, you're just like, that's brain fog with MS. Then you don't have the energy to exercise. So it affects your job, it affects your physical deterioration, and it's a vicious cycle, and I have lived this. It's physically obvious with MS if you have symptoms or have an exacerbation. Today, I look totally normal. Thank God I feel normal, but it's not always that way. It doesn't completely go away. I have to really monitor the way I take care of myself, and part of my health plan is sleep. So lack of sleep, stress, and fatigue are my main triggers, and my doctor has provided a document stated as such. I believe ignorance is not knowing why something happens, but stupidity is not advocating for yourself when you do. So I'm here to advocate for myself today. I'm not willing to agree to anything that would fully adversely impact my health. When the paintball was open, I had to tolerate the noise, often inebriated patrons, when the lots were used for parking, slamming the car doors, yelling, cussing, just crazy stuff, throwing things at my dog in the backyard, bottles in the street. A few times I was unable to go to work the following day because I had so much fatigue. I had to call in sick, which was awful. However, thankfully, I've been able to continue working as a nurse, my lifetime dream, and have learned how to manage my health while maintaining my career. This is one of the most expensive health conditions I can tell you personally and professionally. I take 2 MS medications, and my salary, if I take my whole salary per year, pays for one of those medicines. So if I did not have the insurance by having a job to provide this, I would really have a hard time. So it's a hardship both ways. I just can't risk not being able to continue functioning as a normal person. I feel it is better to address this now before construction begins, because I honestly feel that once it starts, it becomes permanent, and I will have little or no recourse to voice my concerns. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you, Ms. Hawks. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? Please come forward.
Can y'all put the presentation up? My name is James Hawks. I live at 2933 Livingston, and I'm president of the Pascal Neighborhood Association. And that was my wife who spoke. We're opposed to the parking as it is written, the way the shape of the parking lot is as it's written now. It's a hardship for my wife. There's possible noise. There's a possible remote parking for TCU and Pascal events, which we would not like. Possible late night use of the parking lot. Right here, the line, it's not drawing. How do I do that? This line right here is where the setback is going to be 6 feet from our fence, which is 3 feet from our house in our bedroom. So it's 9 feet, and that's not very far. So I went and talked to the neighbors. I have a petition, and most of the neighbors in the 2,900 blocks of Gordon and Livingston, and they agree that that should not be so close to our house. We're not opposed to it. We're opposed to it being so close to the house. And we went and kind of looked at it. If the setback is moved on the Livingston side over here, and you could move the spaces over here and move it away from our house 20, 25 feet. The neighbors are okay with that, as it says in the petition. This is kind of what it would look like. You'd have your green space back here, hopefully, and then you'd have your parking here. And they could go in and out. It would be no problem. And our neighbors, like I said, if you knew our neighborhood, it's okay. They're okay with that front yard parking right there. They agreed with that, And they're also, if you wanted to, they wouldn't mind having cutouts. I mean, we're not opposed to the parking lots, just too close. It would be too adverse of an effect on my wife's health. She's the the closest affected neighbor. I think that's all I needed to say.
Just in time. Thank you for coming and sharing this with us, and I appreciate that you've given us some alternatives, or at least the applicant. That's always helpful. Is there anyone else who would like to register their opposition? Okay. Okay. Great. Mr. Halliday, if you'd like to come back, you've got 3 minutes to rebut or discuss some of the opposition testimony if you'd like.
I guess, as I stated before, the UDC did make a recommendation to approve, and we have looked at landscape options. So, excellent, they're doing our work for us. They've already drawn the site plan. We actually did come prepared with sort of options in our back pocket. What we were trying to do, obviously there's a requirement of a 20-foot front yard setback within an A5 lot, so we didn't want to presume that that would be allowed. I don't know that if the adjacent property owners and Board of Adjustments are amenable to that, I think that the property owner would also be amenable to that. So we're here to work.
Good. Well, let me open the floor to questions from our panel today. Y'all didn't talk prior to this meeting?
We have. We've met in my office, and the property owner and developers have talked with adjacent property owners at length on the phone and through emails.
Okay. Are there any questions for either the applicant or the opposition in this case? Mr. Riley.
I assume if there was an alternate plan considered, we would have to add another variance.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We would need to continue the case in order to advertise for any variances that would be required.
For that reason, I would probably support a continuance. I think I appreciate everybody and how they've talked, and it's not a dead end one way or the other. I would also ask that in that consideration, if you could identify how it could be secured in the evenings, hours of operation,
Yes, sir.
things of that nature, as part of that site plan revision.
Well, there are notes about proposed barricades on the site plan. So, and I should mention that the property owners are under a timeline in order to make this project go forward. And so continuance is a hardship on the overall project.
Well, I
Okay,
don't think
what about a
we
lack-
can't take action on it because it wasn't noticed as a variance on the front yard.
Yeah, I think you could be faced with either a continuance or not being approved at all.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore.
I just had a question. The opposition, you mentioned a cutout on the parking lot. What is that? I don't know what that is.
Mr. Halliday, if you'd step to
sure.
one side, let me.
Just, let's see, is this mine? Oh, this one's not mine. I would say, if I can get back to that picture. Right here on the curb here, it's a residential street, but it's so close to those, the commercial area, you could probably put cutouts here. And there could be a parking right here, would be a little safer for the neighbors or whoever wanted to park. They're not opposed to that because a lot of the neighbors park there anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
I'm just curious on the alley line. Is there a fence in that area?
Mr. Halliday, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm not aware of any requirement for a fence from the alley to the parking lot. There's not a there's no fence there currently, but there is a fence proposed on the north property line.
Well, is it possible to drive out of your parking lot into the alley?
No, sir, that would be a curbed
There would
parking
be a
lot.
curb
Yes, sir.
inside.
Yes, sir.
And would there be landscaping in that area?
Landscaping on the alley?
No, in that area between the end of the parking and the alleyway.
There is a 3-foot buffer there, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Epstein.
In addition to the request that Mr. Riley made, if you make an alternative proposal in conjunction with the neighbors' concerns, in addition to the timing of how late the lot would be open, could you also specify the landscaping, particularly as it fronts that residential street? If cars are moved closer to that and the front yard setback is changed, could you also include information next month on the landscaping?
I would say that we would screen the parking as required, by the city code. Any parking that's facing a right-of-way would need to be screened, landscape screened. As far as what types of plantings, I can't say at this point, or just the height.
It could be just very general of shrubs up to a height as opposed to ground cover or trees. I think that would be sufficient.
Not that you have to answer that today, but
Sure.
for,
Yeah, and
because
I guess,
the point about how late at night the parking lot would be used or early into the morning would also be an important issue, I would think.
yeah, so we would screen the parking as required by zoning code.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, and the time, I don't know hours of operations at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Brisendine.
In the hearing the essence of time and the criticality with that, just kind of throwing this out there as an idea, would y'all be willing to remove the 9 spaces on the north end of the proposal? And then, I assume with staff, they could come back for the front yard, the 20-foot, to remove that 20-foot setback at a later date. I'm just wondering if that would achieve some of the parking needs, or at least securing some of that.
We're about to get some input from staff.
Yes, that would work, because the site plan can show items that are more restrictive than the ordinance as opposed to less. And then if they want to, next month, come back with a variance request to put additional parking spaces in the front setback, they could come back at that time and hear it at the June meeting.
Okay, thank you. My thought is just that it would allow you to at least achieve a large portion of what's desired.
Just to follow on, Dana Bergdorf, Planning and Development. If I agree that the parking spaces at the north end facing that residential lot are a concern. I'm also not fond of the variance, but that's a separate conversation in terms of compatibility with single family. The option, if the applicant wants a decision today, you do have the option, as I believe you were alluding to, which is you could approve the special exception but require the removal of those northern parking spaces. They wouldn't have to come back.
And I believe that's 9 spaces.
So that'd be a question for the applicant. Yeah.
Is that 9 spaces on the north end?
It is. That's correct. So, yeah, I think that we would, in expediency of the project moving forward, the special exception being approved today would be, allow us to move forward. And then as far as the layout of the parking and those specific numbers, we can continue to work with staff and resolve those.
Okay. Ms. Boone Constantino.
This is a question for staff. I don't know that I've ever sat on a request that's been previously approved by the Urban Design Commission. I just wanted to make sure, do they have to go back through that process again if they come back with a request for the setback?
They do not. The
Okay.
requirement that they had to go to the Urban Design Commission for was to allow parking outside of the Barry University District at all.
Okay.
And so it's not a question of how does it look, was is the recommendation to allow it or not.
Okay, thank you. And then a comment for the residents. Thank you for being here and giving us your opinion. That takes a lot of courage to share your story with us, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Riley?
In your testimony, you indicated that the required parking for all the improvements you're planning is 134. This was going to be 42, could be reduced down to 33. Where's the rest of the parking?
There are adjacent properties, approximately 42 are on Livingston, 36 are an adjacent property on Gordon, and then the remainder are this sort of parking area north and west, or north and east of the A5 lots. So it's in a PD. You can see the parking there.
Okay.
Father Stanley.
So that's going to
Adjacent
be,
to Stanley.
You
is that
can-
other auxiliary parking?
You can draw on the screen to show
Yes.
the areas that you're discussing.
That's where the other parking will be?
Yes, sir.
And the development is,
The development is here.
okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions for the applicant in this case, or the opposition? Or maybe a motion?
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve BAC 17029 with the removal of the, I believe, 9 parking spaces on the northern border of the plat as presented. And I will be, yes, yeah, to be replaced by landscaping as well. And I'll be supporting that. Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Brizendine, seconded by Mr. Moore to approve the special exception request, subject to the removal of the parking on the north side and replacement of that parking with landscaping.
I have a question about hours of operation.
Do you have a question, or do you want us?
I'd like the
you
motion
want
maker
With
to.
the addition of the hours of the parking lot being, I believe they've changed. This was designated. With the parking lot to be used only during the business hours of operation.
I'm a little concerned if one of them's a bar, it stays open until 2 o'clock in the morning as an hour of operation.
Keep an hour.
Can we open the hearing and ask what would be
I think we can
the
reopen.
applicant, what would be they would suggest as hour limitation?
Yes, I think we can. I don't think you need to withdraw it, but we'll reopen the hearing for that particular question. Mr. Halliday, if you can come back and address hours of operation, give us some guidance on what you have in, what your intentions are.
Well, I would say that, standard restaurant hours of operation are generally till at least 10 or 12 o'clock midnight. That's when businesses stay open to. With the additional buffer yard, we're trying to, obviously, going beyond the code, standard 5-yard buffer and additional landscape to provide that additional buffer, I
Would
guess.
11 o'clock be
So,
sufficient? Especially knowing that there's additional.
There will be
parking.
other parking that can be used at later hours. I guess the question becomes then of an enforcement and how you get people, excuse me.
I'll make a
11's fine.
amendment to my motion to add
Okay.
the hours of operation be from 8 a.m. until
Mr. Moore, are you agreeable to that addition? Okay, so the revised motion, amended motion, is an approval of the special exception request with removal of parking on the north side, the addition of landscaping in its place, and hours of operation limited to 8 a.m., limited from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Any further discussion on that motion? I have no one in line to speak, so please begin voting. And that motion passes with 8 affirmative votes. So you have the special exception as we modified it, and if you want to do more, you'll have to come back and work with staff on that. Okay. Next item on our agenda